The village of Asuka, in Nara Prefecture, lies in the same valley as Kyoto and Nara. As such, its winters are cold by Japanese standards, and its summers are brutally hot. Rice can't be grown on mountain slopes, so you don't let flat areas like this go to waste, even if it means setting up rice paddies in between graves. Graves are one of the most trustworthy sources we have about prehistoric Japan. Written history in Japan only dates back to about the 5th century. Japan's oldest chronicles discuss events before this time, but since they involve things like the gods creating the Japanese archipelago out of seawater, historians find these accounts unlikely. As the old saying that I just made up goes, words may lie, but pottery will always tell you the truth. So here we are in Asuka, the Japanese equivalent of the Valley of the Kings, but more humble, and with a 7-Eleven. A bit of background. Known as kofun in Japanese, these earthen tombs are generally concentrated in the Kansai region. In English, their distinctive shape is referred to as keyhole, but in Japanese, it's said to resemble a gourd. On the ground, they mostly look like regular hills, but they can be quite striking from the air, especially in the middle of a large city. Most kofun remain covered today, but tomb robbers in time have left some of them uncovered. None of them are quite as grand in scale as the Ishibudai kofun, but all kofun have some kind of chamber like this hidden within them. The majority of them were built from about the 3rd to the 6th century, appropriately known as the Kofun period. So what can these tombs tell us that words cannot? We know from 5th century sources that Japan's ruling clan, the Yamato, lived in the Asuka area, but the sheer number of tombs in the region demonstrates that the Yamato had been living there for a while at that point. We can also use Kofun to make an educated guess about how much of Japan the Yamato controlled. Most tombs are in this area, but they can be found as far south as the lonely island of Yakushima. So either Yamato culture, or Yamato armies, had quite a long reach. Over time, the number of smaller tombs falls, replaced by fewer, but much grander tombs. This suggests that around the beginning of the 6th century, the Yamato state became more centralized. And about 200 years later, after written history had begun, the emperor outlawed burial mounds for anyone but the nobility. But this was largely a moot point, as shortly thereafter cremation became the big new thing. Of course, emperors, being emperors, had their ashes interred in massive octagon tombs representing their authority over all 8 directions. At least, it's presumed that these 8-sided tombs are where 7th or 8th century emperors were buried. Asuka is home to dozens of tombs, many of which are said to be where emperors were laid to rest. But most of the tombs have been looted, and even in the ones that remain undisturbed, it's not like there were signs saying, "Hello, I'm Emperor Shomu." You can make some assumptions from the decorations on the coffins or the amount of riches in the burial chamber, but which tomb belongs to which emperor is largely based on tradition, not archaeology. Identifying tombs is made even more difficult by the Imperial Household Agency. The IHA is the part of the government that deals with the emperor and the imperial family, and it claims supposedly imperial tombs as their property. Now, there's no actual proof that an emperor rests in a given tomb, but the IHA says it does, and they are extremely stingy about allowing excavations. So the only way to find out whether or not Emperor A is inside Tomb A is to excavate it, which the IHA won't allow, because Emperor A is inside of it. A perfect example of a Schrodinger's catch-22. The IHA's rationale for not allowing excavation is that unlike the tomb of Chinese Emperor Qin Shi Huang, or Egyptian Pharaoh Tutankhamun, the current reigning emperor belongs to the single unbroken dynasty of the imperial family, and it would be an insult to desecrate the tombs of his direct ancestors. This is bullshit for two reasons. One, that single unbroken dynasty involves a number of mythical rulers and actual gods, and two, even among those probably fake emperors, there's a break in the dynasty around the year 500. So by the IHA's own reasoning, the tombs of emperors older than that ought to be fair game. You may be thinking, it might hurt the emperor's feelings, is a piss-poor excuse for preventing archaeological excavations, and the emperor might even think so too. But he's legally permitted from saying so. The imperial family are restricted from speaking on anything that might be considered political. The previous emperor, Akihito, had to drop subtle hints that he might like not to be the emperor anymore, maybe, for close to a decade before the IHA finally allowed him to retire. The IHA has relented from time to time. In 2018, they allowed archaeological work on the world's largest burial mound for the first time in 40 years. The conclusion? Somebody important was buried here. Even archaeology has its limits.